All right, welcome to another episode of the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. My name is Fred Diamond. Of course, I'm the author of Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. And of course, I'm the host of this podcast, the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. You can find my book on Amazon, Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends need to know. If you want a personally signed copy or if you want to buy multiple copies, you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn and just reach out to me. By the way, Kenzie, I've made the e-version of the book free for chronic Lyme survivors. We've given away probably over 1,000, close to about 1,500, 1,500 copies of Love, Hope, Lyme all over the world. It's always free for chronic Lyme survivors. Once again, reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn for your copy. You know, when I wrote the book, did all the research, I met some amazing leaders like you in the Lyme community, medical practitioners, advocates, people who run charities, people who run large Facebook communities, and they all help me understand what living with Lyme is all about. So in this podcast, we invite them to share their insights into how people listening, family, friends, supporters, partners can support someone that they love with chronic Lyme. Sometimes we call it persistent Lyme. Just curious, do you call it chronic Lyme or persistent Lyme, or how do you
Chronic.
refer? Chronic.
Chronic.
And if you're if you're a chronic Lyme survivor, hopefully in this podcast, it'll help you understand how you can let your friends and families know how they can support you. And Lindsay, that's been one of the great gifts of this podcast is I've had a lot of Lyme survivors who've reached out to me and said, this has been helpful in helping me communicate to my family and friends what I need from them. That was one of the benefits that I really didn't expect. So one of the major Lyme advocacy organizations that I discovered is the Global Lyme Alliance, and its annual gala is on October 12th in the evening in New York City. And we're honored today. We're excited today. We're talking to the major honoree at the event, Kenzie Vath. She's a Lyme warrior, a mother, a wife. She's a hospitality executive. It's a pretty remarkable event and will feature an appearance by the celebrity ambassador Christopher Maloney from Law and Order fame. I think of him mainly as being from Oz, that TV show, but he's been quite vocal. His family has been touched by Lyme in a deep way. And also at the gala on October 12th, singer-songwriter Debbie Gibson, who has been very public about her battles with Lyme and related tick-borne illnesses, will also perform. So it's going to be an amazing event. Just go to the Global Lyme Alliance website for ticket information. All right, Kenzie Vath, professionally, you're VP of Strategic Innovation at the Pacific Hospitality Group. All right. So I'll be honest with you, that's a pretty heady job. And I went to your LinkedIn page and I went to your to the company website. To be honest with you, I talked to a lot of Lyme survivors who struggle to get out of bed, right? Who struggle to function throughout the day. And I have spoken to a number of them who have pretty important and heady jobs. One last thing before I start talking to you, you say on the GLA site, your theme, of course, is to give hope to all those Lyme warriors, that it is possible to live a normal life and even beyond a normal life. And again, my book, Love, Hope, Lyme. Kenzie, I was going to call it Love, Loss, Lyme as we were drafting it. And I said, you know what, this is a community with plenty of loss. They don't need to be reminded about that. So I'm glad to see that we both are focusing on hope, and I'm really excited for what your speech is going to be about at the gala. Talk first about working. Again, VP of Strategic Innovation, Pacific Hospitality Group. You can tell us a little bit about what PHG does and how do you perform at such an important and high level job with chronic Lyme?
Well, I'm sure so many people wonder what that title means and what does it cover? What do you do for work? Pacific Hospitality Group here at PHG, we are an asset management and a hospitality management. We own, operate, and manage a handful of hotels. Mostly, we're heavy in California, but we have hotels everywhere from New Orleans, Texas, Arizona. So it gives me a good opportunity to travel, which I love. And here at PHG, as the VP of Innovation, I focus mainly on CapEx. So very strategic design and development, as well as I oversee the wellness department, the retail department, and sustainability. So it's a big undertaking and a great job, but I love the building side of it. I love seeing a ground that we buy and building a hotel on it and creating all the steps to get there and what it takes. Also the remodels. It's so fun to take one of our older assets that we've had in the collection for a handful of years and really bring it up to a more modern aesthetic, leaning into local arts or local design. So that's what I do on my day-to-day.
So everybody wants to know, how do you perform such an important and intensive and, a job that you really need to focus on? You got to think strategically with Lyme disease. Talk about that. How do you work with the disease?
Yeah, it's hard. It's definitely a day-to-day battle. Number one is staying focused on my mission and my goal. A lot of it is the mental battle that you have to tell yourself, I want to do this. I'm going to get up. I'm going to push. I'm going to focus. But it's also ensuring I stay to my routine. I stick to when I go to bed at night. I get off the screens at a certain time. Like once I'm done with work, I get off the screens, I'm off the phones, I'm off the emails, and I rest my brain, I rest my body, and I get to bed. I make sure I eat a really clean diet. I usually fast in the mornings. I don't consume any like artificial sugars or caffeines, any stimulants. I do daily detoxing. I love Epsom salt baths. If I feel that my body is feeling restless or I need to just soothe my body a little bit more, I'll get in a warm bath with some Epsom salts, and that seems to really help me. So it's just sticking to a really strict regimen, a daily routine to make sure I write down all my notes. I keep things organized because my brain can sometimes get scattered or get that brain fog. That is probably one of the most frustrating symptoms for me, particularly because I feel I'm very well equipped to be able to do more, but my brain will stop me from being able to do everything that I want to do. So thorough notes and organization is truly the fountain of youth for my industry.
So I don't have Lyme disease, and most people listening to the podcast know that I wrote this book and do the podcast because someone in my life did have chronic Lyme disease, and I wanted to know more about that. You mentioned brain fog. The reason I bring that particular thing up is my book is not about treatment. We don't talk about treatment strategies on the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. I'm not a doctor. I'm a history major with an MBA who runs a sales organization. Do you do anything specific for the brain fog? And I don't want to get too deep into how you treat yourself because that's not really the purpose of today. But I know people listening are going to be wondering what specifically you might be doing for brain fog.
I've noticed over 20 plus years that the biggest thing linked to brain fog is definitely food. So I'm very mindful about choosing when I consume gluten. They call it kind of like they have the gluten gut. I always also think there's the gluten brain. So gluten, sugar, and dairy are definitely my triggers. It's trying to keep my body from, increasing my inflammation markers, any stress that would increase my inflammation. So making sure I just keep my body at bay, taking care of myself, almost like kind of like a baby. My immune system's compromised, so I have to be mindful of, what I'm being exposed to, how I'm maintaining my stress in an everyday life.
So in your bio on the GLA website, and we'll provide links to that website. And I believe you also have a website as well where you talk about your journey. We'll provide some.
Yeah.
We'll provide some links to that as well. You talk about how you had an aha moment. You were bitten, you believe, when you were in your age 10, I believe it was.
Yes.
And you went through a lot of the processes that a lot of the people listening to today's podcast have gone through to discover when they had Lyme. And then there was an event that you went to with your parents and you had an aha moment that what you probably had was Lyme disease. And then you talk about how your family became very involved with the philanthropy side. You're being recognized by GLA, the Global Lyme Alliance. Can you talk a little bit about that? What led you to being their honoree this year? And then we'll get into some specific questions about what we want to tell the partners and friends.
I'm beyond honored to be an honoree for GLA. To be honest, it was determination. When I went through my Lyme journey, it took 10 years before I was diagnosed, and then another 10 years of treatment. What people don't know is when you get that diagnosis, the next chapter, the next journey begins. And the journey isn't easy. It's a roller coaster. It's very rough. You don't think you're going to make it through. It's very dark. It's very negative. Like you fall into a hole of depression, anxiety, just, debilitating thoughts. And I get the chills just thinking that I had the opportunity to first get diagnosed, and then I was in the early stages of the treatment phases for Lyme disease. And I was really lucky to be able to get the results that I did within the time I did. But it took a long time. It wasn't quick. I had to be very patient. And I'm not a patient person, to be honest. So that was very difficult for me. But my family was there to support me, as you mentioned. And when I started to reach out online for different resources, I found GLA and I leaned into it and I said, hey, how can I get involved? I need to learn more, but I really want to see like who else is suffering out there. I feel really alone. I feel like I'm by myself on this island, just, dealing with these symptoms. It was very isolating. Even my family, even though they were there supporting me, they didn't really understand what I was going through. And that was really difficult for me to articulate. So being able to lean on GLA and see that there are other people out there suffering that are in the same boat as I am, it gave me hope. It gave me hope saying, okay, well, if there's other people out there, we're going to find an answer, because the more people that speak up and share their story, the more opportunity that people will research this and learn more about Lyme disease, because it is a very complex and misunderstood condition. So I was excited to get that connection and get involved. And so I got the opportunity to meet Scott, who used to run Lyme GLA. And he was really involved in getting a little bit more awareness out there about GLA. So I was helping kind of on an ambassador level to support them here in Southern California. We don't really have a lot of representation here in Southern California. So that was a need that I could see immediately with GLA. At that time, I wasn't as active because I didn't have the energy and I was going through treatment. So I could only give what I had. And then as I got through my next level of treatment and I launched Holistic Umbrella, my own company that was doing Lyme coaching. I, like you, had a flood of people just wanting, having questions, wanting answers, thanking me to being out there and sharing my story and recommendations and how to get through this. And so I said, okay, well, I need to do this on a larger scale. So I reached back in and I got involved with GLA again. And then Laura came to the scene, and she has been pinnacle for GLA's growth. And I'm so proud and so excited to have her be leading GLA now. Nancy Del Gennaro, who I got to connect tightly with as well as a board member. And I was telling her a lot about this book idea that I wanted to do. I didn't know everything at the time. I didn't have all the details, but I knew I wanted to lean into it and say, hey, I need GLA's backing to make this bigger, not for me, but for our community. And so she continued to have conversations with me, got me involved, introduced me to more board members. And I told her, you know what? I have a bigger goal. I want to be on the board of GLA. And it's a big step because I sit on other boards, but nothing like this. And I was younger in my field, etc. And so I got the opportunity. I met Laura. We were sitting in New York having a cocktail together, me, Nancy, and Laura. And I told her what I wanted to do for GLA. And I said, any gap areas, this is what I want to fill. And I want to grow it and I want to make it big. And, I'm going to do my best being present and supporting the organization. She obviously felt comfortable with that and leaned into me, and she said, okay. So she took it to the board. They voted and I got to be on the board. So not only do I sit for the board, but I also am a huge advocate for GLA, specifically here, as I mentioned, on the West Coast. And I do an art gala. We just had one this year, our first annual, but we'll be doing it every year, where we raise funds for GLA. So really, really honored to be supporting the fundraising side, to be supporting the awareness side, and just being an advocate and, a listener in the Lyme space too.
Good. So we'll provide some links to GLA and to the various services that they provide. I want to ask you a question. So again, I've spoken to a lot of parents who have teenagers or children who have Lyme disease. And one thing they talk about is that their children lose friends during especially the teen years, because there's so much going on and people don't understand. And especially, you growing up in Southern California, where I'm sure you probably had so many people say to you, well, there's no Lyme in Southern California, right? I hear people in North Carolina and Virginia get doctors who say you don't have Lyme disease because it's only in New England or Hudson Valley or something like that, which of course we all know is false. Lyme's been found in every state. What are some of the thoughts you'd like to communicate to the mothers and the teenagers who are going through Lyme? You said you didn't know you even had Lyme disease, but you had something. Give us some advice for them as their friends are struggling with understanding and leave, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's not, an easy hole in your heart to fill when you lose, a loved one out of your life or a friend drops off. And it's inevitable when you're ill. Illnesses create separation between people that are dealing with the illness and someone that just doesn't understand or how to navigate it. And it can be something as simple as I had to learn this later on, but my friends would tell me they just didn't know what to say. Because if they said, oh, you look great, I would get defensive because I didn't feel great. Or, oh, how are you doing? Are you feeling better? You seem strong today. It was like every comment they had, I had some snarky, comment back because they didn't really know. But it wasn't that they didn't want to know. It was really, they just didn't know how. And I didn't know how to articulate what I was going through clearly for them to understand. So I think as a parent, and I can speak now to this because I am a parent, I'm a mom of 3. And the reason, I leaned in and got involved more with GLA2 was so I could really make a difference for the future of my kids. And that's really why I fight today. But to the parent, you really have to keep, your network small around you, and the parent needs just as much support. The caretaker goes through a different loss and different pain that they see from the outside as well. So they're suffering just in a different way. And so I would say, I give you grace to the parent that's dealing with these children. It's very difficult to navigate, what mood they're going to wake up in that day and how they're going to feel. Are they able to get out of bed and go to school, or will they be missing school? You just don't know. It's very, unpredictable. But keeping a small network next to you, very small and close, educate them about Lyme disease, give them resources. There wasn't enough books and resources out at my time. There is now. There's plenty of resources to lean into my book or your book and say, hey, here's how you can help us. Even if you can't muster up the strength to share exactly what they can do for you. This is how you can help us. And you'll be surprised how many people will lean in and help. They'll make a meal and drop it off at your door, or, they'll write a card, or, donate to the organization or cause that supports you, that you feel strong about. It's pretty amazing how people will help. And it might not be exactly what you need at the time, but it will come when you do need it. And I say for the caretakers, you have to take care of yourself too. My mom was my caretaker and she suffered alongside me. And to this day, I feel guilty about that. But as a mom, I know I would do the exact same thing. And so I understand her now. I didn't understand, and I wanted my life to be over because I didn't want her suffering anymore.
Yeah.
And that was really hard, but I know that she would do it again in a heartbeat, and she would take the pain away from me. And I'm glad now that she is caring for herself and getting to have a life again. So it's important. You got to find that balance and just educate the people around you and tell them how to lean in. Just give them guidance.
Yeah, that's a great answer. When I first started meeting people who have chronic illness, and to be honest with you, I really wasn't very conscious of it until I had an incident in my life with someone who I really cared for. And I remember I've made thousands of friends on social media, and one person, I remember I said something like, I hope you have a great weekend or something like that. And she replied, that's not the right thing to say with someone with a chronic illness because they're not going to have a great weekend. I think she might have overdone the response, but there's definitely a sensitivity. Well, that being said, what are 3 things you would strongly recommend that family members, partners, and friends need to know about what their loved one is going through. And once again, we're talking today on the Love Hope Lyme podcast with Kenzie Vath. Kenzie is the honoree, the 2023 honoree from the Global Lyme Alliance. Their gala is on October 12th in New York. And if, again, you're listening in the future, it was on October 12th. But what are 3 things that you would recommend that people should know that they might not be aware of?
Yes. It was tough to boil it down when you gave me this question ahead of time. It took me some time to really think about what are the critical things that would have been helpful for my caretaker and those out there. And I'd say, number 1, get educated. Google chronic Lyme disease specifically, because Lyme, when you get Lyme disease, you can treat it within a specific time frame. But once it goes chronic, the disease and its future changes greatly, and the person dealing with the disease, as well as, the 2 degrees around that person. So I would say, number 1, get educated. It is very complicated. It's very misunderstood. It is not a simple infection that many people think. It cannot be easily treated. It cannot be easily, tested and diagnosed. It's multi-symptomatic illness that can affect various organs and symptoms in your body, leading to a wide range of symptoms and complications that are very difficult to deal with on a day-to-day basis, as you said. So get educated. Secondly, be patient. Lyme disease, Lyme warriors, as I call them, that are battling with chronic illness, they are hot and cold. Sometimes they wake up and they feel a little less pain and a little more energy, and they'll lean into the day. And sometimes they can't even wake up and they won't get out of bed. They call you and they need help getting out of bed. And it's very draining. It's very draining, not only, as I mentioned, for the Lyme warrior, but it's draining for the caretaker. So patience, practice patience with them. They're not really aware totally sometimes their external reactions and the subconscious that's reacting to their surroundings as well. And the third thing I would say is listen. When they talk and when they say things, sometimes it might not sound like them. Like if you're close with this person, it doesn't really sound like them. So take note of that when they're not acting like themselves versus the days they're acting like themselves, and you're connecting with them at a different level. When they're saying things that don't relate to them normally, they're saying something important. And I remember a key word for me was tired. When I told my mom, I am so tired, Mom, I can't do this anymore. That was like my key word of like, I can't keep going. I need help. That was my it. Which seems so simple because tired, it's like everybody uses tired. Like, oh, are you tired today? Or, how are you feeling? Or, oh, you're yawning. And, it seems like it doesn't hold weight, but for me, it did. And she could tell when I had the weight and the just the sadness behind tired, the word tired, she knew, okay, I need to step it up. I need to do something. We need to get her relief for something, because I wouldn't want to keep going anymore. I wouldn't want to
and that's a great way you described it. I've heard, if I have, or a lot of people without Lyme disease or any chronic illness has a tough day, come home, make yourself a little dinner, turn on the TV, go to sleep, and you'll be fine the next day. I've spoken to some Lyme survivors who said, that fatigue, that tiredness, if you will, it's not even recoverable sometimes for days. And, they may stay in bed I've spoken to people who've stayed in bed for weeks because they just the tiredness of getting up, and tiredness doesn't even make sense. I want to follow up on something you just asked. Again, we're talking to Kenzie Vath today. Were there times when you didn't know who you were? Were there times when you went to a place where what's it? I don't want to get too graphic because I really don't want to get too deep into that side of what you went through, but just so that people understand, the family members, partners, and friends, were there times when you were in a place where you were at that state where you just weren't Kenzie anymore? And could you explain it? Could you feel it? Or was it just a different state of being?
I think you said it. It was a different state of being. There was definitely times where I felt disconnected with my body. I felt disconnected with my spirit, this like mind, body, spirit. I mean, everything through my whole experience with Lyme disease, those three things never added up. It was either my body was struggling or my mind was struggling or my spirit was struggling. And there was never synergy. There was never balance. There was never harmony between those three things that I think are pinnacle for like wellness, overall wellness, holistic wellness. And those three things would never add up for me. And mainly my mind really suffered because when I wasn't capable of doing the things I knew I was capable of doing, I think I was mentioning to you earlier, I struggled a lot in school, but I knew I was, well educated. I was smart enough to get something done. I was capable, but I physically couldn't perform. I physically couldn't do what they were asking me to do because of my Lyme, and because it stopped me from, being able to think quick enough or complete a test, or the anxiety got in the way, or my memory was, struggling. And I still have that a lot today. I have to be very careful about, as I mentioned, where I keep information, because I'll just be on a pathway and then I'll be like, wait a minute, where was I going? kind of thing. But yeah, it's really difficult. And I just never felt at harmony through this disease. It really took over who I was. It became the voice for me. I felt like these bugs were like the voice for me. And my mom would even look at me and she's like, I don't know who I'm looking at. Like, I don't know, this isn't my daughter. And she would get panicky and she would have anxiety and she would stay up all night thinking like, what's happening to my daughter? Why is something taking over her? This is scary. Until she'd see those, those few days where I would break through that darkness and break through that control of the disease. And then she'd say, oh, okay, she's there. I need to pull her out from that. And that's what she'd focus on. And that's where you have to really lean in and listen to, as a caretaker, you need to listen to your child or your spouse or your partner, whoever it may be, and say, when I see those days where you are yourself, I'm going to continue to lean in and pull you out and tell you I'm there for you and tell you I love you and tell you I'm supporting you. And we're going to get through this. And you have to fight for them. You have to fight. And then those days where they, you don't feel yourself and you feel misaligned, support them, be patient with them, and be next to them.
So before I ask you for your final thought, again, I want to acknowledge Kenzie Vath. She's the Global Lyme Alliance honoree this year. The event again, it's in October 12th in New York City. I just want to touch on one thing. You mentioned that you're a mother of three. In my book, I Love Hope Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know, I have a chapter specifically for, now again, the context of my book, even though men and women, of course, can get chronic Lyme, it was written as if your spouse is a woman. What is your advice? Again, a young mother of three, what is your advice to the fathers, the husbands, if you will? Having three young kids with perfect health, is extremely stressful. And, there's so much that you want for your children. And, obviously you want them to be active at the same time, you have in the background this disease. So what is your advice for husbands of young mothers to things that they might see that they might not understand that you would recommend that they be conscious of specifically to that group?
That's a tough question. I definitely, my caretaker was a mom. She was a woman. As a mom, I'm the caretaker for my kids, the main one, and I'll do anything for my kids, as would my husband. But it is complicated as a man. I think two sides, right? If you have an illness and you're a man, I think I've seen in the trend is that you don't share your story with many people. So you stay really quiet. It was even harder for my book, The Ignored Pandemic, when I was interviewing people all over the world. It was harder to find males sharing their story online. I found a lot of females that were doing it, but I couldn't find many males, which I thought was interesting. But I know they're out there and I know they're suffering, but many of them ignore it and many of them don't share. So I think they have their own type of suffering that we need to help find a solution for. But as the caretaker side of a male, it was very hard for my father to watch me go through what I was going through. And he didn't really know how to approach it. Just the type of male he was. He didn't know how hot and cold I was. And he was afraid to, say something, where my mom, she just knew she had to say something. She had to get involved. She had to lean in. She had no choice. But I would say for the father or for the brother, just ask, how can I help? If they don't respond or they don't know, because the majority of men don't know how to help, in general. But I think just asking and saying, how can I help? And if you don't feel comfortable asking, telling them, I'm there for you. I'm there for you. I love you. The unconditional support, is probably the number one thing that anyone with a chronic illness needs, is just knowing that people love them, they're cared for, and someone's there for them if they need it. And once they're ready to ask for that need, or ask for an ear to listen to them, or whatever it may be, then they'll do so when they're ready. But just telling them all the time, I love you, I'm there for you, it's going to be okay, I'm praying for you, whatever it may be, that gives them just that extra, support inside of them. There's something very powerful about that energy in those words.
You mentioned your book. Tell us briefly about your book, and then I want to get your final thought that you'd like to leave us with today.
Yes. Okay. So I'm so excited. This was a passion project I did within a year. It's called The Ignored Pandemic: Real Stories of Lyme Disease. And my whole vision for this book was I wanted to educate the general public about Lyme disease. So that's the whole first part, is just Lyme 101, so to speak. And then the second part, which is probably the most powerful to me and really changed my trajectory in the Lyme space, was my interview to these amazing Lyme warriors. I interviewed people from all over the world because I really wanted to show that Lyme is not just within the US. We're speaking about it and we have the rights to speak about it, and amen for us to being able to do so. And there's a lot of stuff behind there as well, behind that curtain, that I don't want to open. But there are a lot of countries that continue to say it doesn't exist. There's no doctors to treat it. They don't have the testing access. They don't have any access, really, informational access to Lyme. And that was hurting my heart. And I know that there is a huge global outbreak of this disease that the CDC is not reporting specifically. And so I really wanted to pluck a few of these stories from all over our world. So I have a representation from India, Ireland, England, Australia, Canada, everywhere. And it's amazing how aligned all of our stories are, how parallel so many of our symptoms are, but then how unique each one was diagnosed. And the process of that, I think, is so unique. And so I was honored to be able to get that opportunity to lean in and find these individuals to share their story. And that changed my life forever. And I hope it changes theirs. And it's and I actually have it in front of me. This gets to be their story that they can share with their family and friends, because many of them lost a lot of friends, lost a lot of family, lost loved ones in their process of Lyme, and they didn't know what to do. And so now that they shared their story and it's written and it's out there, because some might not be capable of doing that, and some are, they can hand this book to them and say, here is what I struggled with, and walk away from it. Because sometimes just writing it out and sharing the story in a written form is a lot easier than sharing it verbally, because it gets very emotional and then you get lost in the emotion and it doesn't come out as clear. So I'm super excited about this passion project. And I just want to note too, at the back of the book, I did a fax area, and then I did a fun share your story, you could save lives. And then I have a QR code where every person can share their story, and it goes directly on the Global Lyme Alliance website. And we have the Global Lyme Alliance community And this is a really important piece because this is where we're really trying to collect these stories to show how big of an issue this is. And I also created a Lyme Warrior playlist that I was super excited about as well, just because I noticed that music is very healing for people. So yeah, go out. My book's on Amazon. And you can also send me a message on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. On Holistic Umbrella is my my Lyme platform. I'd be happy to send you a signed copy as well. But I'm super honored to have this book, and also for Chris Maloney that did my foreword for the book as well. I grew up watching Law and Order, so for him to do my foreword was like celebrity superstar. Like, oh my gosh, what an alignment that. I love SVU, and now, you know, the OG got to do my foreward. So I'm very honored.
Good for you. Congratulations on the book. You know, a couple of things come to mind. One is, even if you just tell somebody, I have Lyme disease, it's a tick-borne illness, there's fatigue. I mean, that's like 0.0001% of what Lyme survivors go through. And like I mentioned to you before I started my research for my book, I had no idea. My motto or mantra was, keep this particular person out of stress and find out where the best gluten-free pizza was. And, I had no more, and I was very devoted and living very closely, but I didn't have any idea. So the fact that people can get deeper and to tell their stories so that their loved ones can hopefully spend the time to read on that. Before I ask you for your final tip, I got to ask you, just tell us one or two songs that are on your playlist.
Okay, well, the song that I added, and I asked every interviewee for a song recommendation. So I did a collection of all of our songs together. But my number one song is Tired by Kygo. It's a remix version, but basically the words, "Let me love you when your heart is tired," that resonates with me so much because that's all I needed. Yeah. I just needed someone to love me when I was done.
Very good. And as a caregiver, I love Tom Petty. I continue to find more and more meaning in Tom Petty as the days go by. All right. Once again, congratulations, Kenzie Vath, for all that you're doing and for the recognition. Briefly give us one final thought that you'd like people to think about and hopefully maybe even to put into action to help their loved ones deal with this ridiculous disease more easily.
Yes. Thank you, Fred. I would say it is crucial to approach chronic Lyme disease with empathy, understanding, and support. Educate yourself about the condition. Be there for your loved ones unconditionally, and expect that the journey is going to have ups and downs. The journey is a total roller coaster. By being a source of support for them, it really helps validate what they're going through and helps them fight harder to get through this disease. And it makes a very significant difference in their life and living with chronic Lyme disease.
All right. Once again, I want to thank Kenzie Vath. If you're listening to today's show on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review. If you're watching it on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment. My name is Fred Diamond. This is the Love, Hope, Lyme Podcast.